Wichita Liberty TV, featuring host Bob Weeks. Local politics without the spin. Interviews with nationally respected economists. Hear directly from Kansas conservatives about what matters to you. It's individual liberty, limited government, and free markets. Wichita Liberty TV.
Hello, I'm Bob Weeks for Wichita Liberty TV, your weekly source for news, analysis, and commentary about Wichita and Kansas government and public affairs. Broadcast on Great Plains Television, channel 26.1, and its companion website, kgpt26.com. Some of you may know me for my blog, that's The Voice for Liberty at wichitaliberty.org. The motto there is individual liberty, limited government, free markets, and economic freedom in Wichita and Kansas. If you'd like to learn more about the issues covered today or to contact me, well, please visit wichitaliberty.org. You can subscribe to the email newsletter, like The Voice for Liberty on Facebook, and follow me, Bob Weeks, on Twitter. Well, sometimes things happen that make you shake your head. In fact, there's an abbreviation used in text messages, Twitter, and other places on the internet that I finally figured out. SMH, meaning shaking my head, and usually in disbelief or astonishment. Here's an example. This is a story in the Wichita Business Journal from this February. It said, Wichita has a lot of great things going on, but how do people find out about them? There should be an app for that, say members of the Emerging Leaders program. Rather than having to visit a number of individual websites to find out about what's happening locally, the all-female group of 10 emerging leaders who sat down with the WBGA as part of the Breakfast with the Editor series say Wichita would be well served to have a single place people can go for a comprehensive list of all the goings-on in the community. That's what the Wichita Business Journal reported. And I wonder if the reporters and editors there can see the rich irony in this article. It reports on a group of business leaders complaining about the lack of information about Wichita. And this was reported in a newspaper. Now, what is in a better position to do what these young leaders want, which is to provide information, than a newspaper? I wonder if we've forgotten about the role of newspapers, their websites, and their mobile apps. Well, another thing I wonder about. In the Kansas legislature, when a bill is introduced, it may carry the name of the author or sponsor, or it may not. Now, some people, like the Wichita Eagle editorial board, they want the bills to always carry the name of the legislator who introduced it. And the argument made by the editorial board is that it lets us know who is behind the bill. It promotes transparency. It helps us evaluate the bill, says the editorial board. Well, I think that the identity of a bill's sponsor actually serves to cause less thoughtful evaluation. That's because when a bill is introduced by legislator A, opponents often say that legislator A is just a tool of certain special interest groups. It could be special interest groups on the right or left, it doesn't matter. The bill will be rejected simply because of the identity of its sponsor. With anonymous legislation, at least people will have to think a bit. And I don't know why the Wichita Eagle editorial board thinks that is a bad thing. Another thing, you know that school funding in Kansas is contentious, and sometimes the debate is simply unfactual. A recent newspaper article featured the Lawrence School Board president complaining about school funding. Now, Lawrence is a large school district, the fourth largest in Kansas. Now, I know that evaluating school funding and spending can be difficult, and right now there is argument over whether retirement benefits should be counted as part of school spending. But there's another way to evaluate school spending. According to the federal government, schools usually spend about 80% of their budgets on personnel, teachers, and so forth. So what if we look at the number of teachers and other employees? And when we do that, well, we find that the number of teachers and certified employees in Lawrence schools has risen since 2011. And these numbers rose faster than the number of students. Consequently, the ratios of students to these employees declined, and not just by small amounts. The change is pretty big. The Lawrence School District has more teachers per student than it did 5 years ago, yet the district complains about funding. Shaking my head yet again. In last episode, we talked about regulation of occupational licenses. It was with regard to massage therapists then. Well, physicians are licensed too. In Kansas, to keep their licenses, physicians and dentists must participate in continuing medical education. This education requirement is satisfied by participating in, according to the Kansas regulations, activity designed to maintain, develop, or increase the knowledge, skills, and professional performance of persons licensed to practice a branch of the healing arts. Well, okay, I guess this sounds reasonable. But now there's a bill in Kansas. Legislative research explains that the bill would allow charitable health care providers and dentists to fulfill 1 hour of continuing education credit for performance of 2 hours of gratuitous service to medically indigent persons. So instead of sitting in a class or seminar learning something, physicians might be able to satisfy part of their educational requirements by providing free medical care to poor people. And in an op-ed published in the Wichita Eagle, Representative Dan Hawkins of Wichita explained, "We believe that this system has the potential of generating more than $18 million in free care for the neediest Kansans." Well, I have some news for Representative Hawkins. The care won't be free. Now, it may not cost the state of Kansas anything, but it will have a cost to the doctors who supply the purportedly free care. Perhaps more importantly, this bill should make us question the purpose of continuing medical education requirements for physicians and dentists. In Kansas, physicians must participate in 50 hours of this education annually. And this education requirement is fulfilled by participating in, as the regulation says, activity designed to maintain, develop, or increase the knowledge, skills, and professional performance. But this proposed bill will let physicians satisfy 20 hours of this requirement by providing 40 hours of health care to needy people. Having doctors perform routine medical care, doing their daily job in other words, that doesn't seem likely to advance the knowledge, skills, and professional performance of doctors, which is the stated goal of the regulation. So we have, therefore, a regulation that seems reasonable. That isn't to ensure doctors are up to date in professional knowledge. Instead, it's being used by the state to encourage doctors to provide free labor. Shaking my head again. Episodes like this should be a lesson in the powers and abuses of the regulatory state. Welcome back to Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks. You probably remember the November 2014 election. That was the election in which the city of Wichita recommended voters spend $250 million on a new water supply. But since voters rejected the tax to support that spending, the cost of providing adequate water has dropped, and dropped a lot. The events surrounding the need for a new water supply is really a troubling episode in the history of Wichita government. During the prelude, the run-up to the November 2014 election, citizens were presented with a gloomy scenario that could be fixed only with a sales tax and the spending of $250 million, the city said. After voters said no, new plans emerged that are much less expensive. Lily Tomlin once said, "No matter how cynical you become, it's never enough to keep up." And this episode shows Wichita city leaders, both in and out of government, reinforcing the truth of Tomlin's observation. Well, here's what happened. On December 1st last year, the Wichita City Council had a workshop on the topic Phased Approach for New Water Supply. Alan King, the city's Director of Public Works and Utilities, was the presenter. King emphasized that the impetus for a new water supply was for drought protection, telling the council we presently have enough water with our current water resources to last us through our planning period of 2060 without drought. And he continued to tell the council, when we come and talk to you about additional water resources, it is really only for one purpose, and that is drought protection. If there was no drought, we have no need. The water resources that we come in and are talking to you about, the only value they have for us is in drought protection. It's Alan King, Director of Public Works. But at the time, before the election, a city document presented a different scenario. It threatened a lack of water for even residential use. It said building a new supply, along with conservation efforts, is the lowest cost option for providing sufficient water through 2060. Significant conversation will be needed if the current supplies are the sole source of water for the coming decades. Severe conservation requirements could be harmful to local businesses and quality of life. Adding a new water supply would provide enough water for future growth for the community's residential, commercial, and industrial base. This is an important point. We have sufficient water except for a period of extended drought. Even in that case, there is sufficient water for residential, commercial, and industrial use. The purpose of a new water supply is to avoid restrictions on outdoor watering, and in the most extreme drought, a savings of 15% of indoor water usage. Well, in his December presentation to the council, King presented several phases that the city can take. The first three have no cost, and King said these are underway. After that, the city can spend $23 million for new wells and rehabilitation of existing wells at the ASR site. And after that, there is the possibility of what he called operational credits, which involve a change to state regulations. And if the state of Kansas approves, the city can receive credits for sending ASR water directly to Wichita instead of recharging it in the Equus beds. If not approved, the city could spend $47 million for new recharge wells in 2022. So if these wells are built, the cost rises to about $70 million. Well, there's also the matter of the parallel pipeline. The existing pipeline from the Equus beds and ASR to the city's downtown water plant is old and won't supply the higher rates of water transmission. The proposed parallel pipeline provides not only redundancy of a major part of our water infrastructure, but also increased capacity. And the cost of this was estimated in 2014 at $86 million and was included in the $250 million price tag for ASR expansion. So if the parallel pipeline cost is added to the previous cost, the total cost rises to either $109 or $156 million, depending on the fate of the operational credits regulation reform. Well, either way, the cost is much less than the $250 million the city asked voters to consider in November 2014. And I think I'm being charitable of motives when I say consider. The clear and revealed preference of the city council and the city's political class was passage of the sales tax, meaning the city would spend $250 million to achieve something the city now says can be provided for $109 million or $156 million. Well, everyone except then city council member and now Mayor Jeff Longwell, but his vote against placing the sales tax on the ballot was a naked political calculation. Well, in information the city presented to voters in the run-up to the November 2014 election, the city promised large water bill increases if the sales tax vote failed, writing, "If a new water supply is funded only through water rate increases, the capital cost portion of the rate will increase an estimated 24%. This is in addition to anticipated annual rate increases." But King's 2015 presentation to the council showed increases of 9% for residential, commercial, and industrial customers, 9% as compared to 24%. Well, citizens ought to wonder what lessons may be learned from this, and here are a few things I'd like for you to notice. First, the City Council and its Communications Department have been silent on this issue. Now, I said that the city recommended that voters approve the tax and spending on ASR, and I'm sure council members will dispute this. They will tell you that they only voted to let you vote on ASR. So we need to ask the council, why did you let us vote on something that we now know would be stupid to do? Will the council and manager take responsibility for this? Well, second, we see that the first impulse of government is to spend. And when citizens say no, and say no emphatically, somehow government finds another way. It's funny how that works, isn't it? It took me a long time to write about this. It was just too painful to realize what we almost did regarding ASR through the sales tax. I mentioned this to a friend who understood, telling me of becoming almost inconsolable when thinking about it, and particularly over the lack of news media coverage on this issue. And while I put off writing about this matter, I thought that surely some reporter somewhere will write about the December workshop and what we've learned. But nothing has appeared so far. That is a real problem, and it is the third thing that citizens should learn. In particular, the state's largest newspaper has no good reason to avoid reporting and editorializing on this important issue. But that's what the Wichita Eagle has done. The Wichita Eagle editorial board urged voters to approve the sales tax in the November 2014 election. It told readers that spending $250 million on ASR would assure a future for Wichita with enough water. The needs are clear, the editors wrote, adding, investing in the Aquifer project seems to be the best thing to do to anticipate and meet Wichita's water needs. And to top it off, the Eagle editorial board warned of much higher water rates if the sales tax is not passed. Well, since voters rejected the tax to support that spending, the cost of providing adequate water has dropped, and dropped a lot, as we now know. The threat of large increases in water bills has evaporated, but you would not know that by reading the Wichita Eagle or by relying on our city's other mainstream news media outlets. So why hasn't the Wichita Eagle reported on this December 1st, 2015 workshop in which Director of Public Works and Utilities Alan King presented the new plans? Plans we now know cost much less? Why have there been no editorials celebrating that we can provide adequate water at much less expense? Now, I can understand the editorial writers not wanting to admit they had been duped. That's human nature. But for the news division of the Eagle, why no reporting on this? As it happens, the newsroom of the Eagle was also a cheerleader for the sales tax and ASR project. As an example, the Eagle printed a fact-check article that disputed claims made by opponents of the sales tax. When asked why there was not a similar fact-check article on the proponents, the reporter said there were no errors to be found. Nothing. That was incredulous, even unbelievable at the time. There were many questionable claims made by sales tax proponents, and in hindsight, we are even more certain of that. The Wichita Eagle has plenty of reporting capacity, many barrels of ink, and lots of online bandwidth to report and editorialize on issues like who gets free parking at the Wichita airport. That's important, perhaps, but trivial in terms of financial impact. But on this issue involving over $100 million in savings, $100 million we almost wasted, there is nothing but silence. The state's largest newspaper has no good reason to avoid reporting and editorializing on an important issue like this. But that's what the Wichita Eagle has done. We need to wonder why. Welcome back to Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks. There's controversy in the Kansas legislature this year regarding Kansas teachers' unions. When evaluating any proposed legislation involving teachers' unions, It's helpful to have some background and knowledge of how teachers influence public schools. Here, Professor Terry Moe of Stanford University explains.
Shortly after taking office, President Barack Obama's Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, acknowledged that America's public school system is broken. It's obvious the system's broken, he said. Let's admit it's broken. Let's admit it's dysfunctional. Let's do something dramatically different, and let's do it now. Let's fix the thing. Why are America's public schools failing? Why, after more than a quarter century of perpetual reform, has the nation been unable to bring real change to public education? Well, a complete answer, of course, would be very complicated. But at the heart of it lies the power of the teachers' unions, the National Education Association, the American Federation of Teachers, and their state and local affiliates. Now, I don't say this out of some sort of anti-union ideology. I say it as an objective description of reality, backed by an enormous amount of data. Union power has created insurmountable problems for effective schools. Why has this happened? Partly it's because the teachers' unions are by far the most powerful groups in American education. More than that, they're special interest groups, which means that they use their power to promote the special interests, the job interests of their members. They're just not in the business of representing the interests of children, and no one should expect them to do that. The purpose of a union is to represent the job interests of its members, and these interests are simply not the same as the interests of children. So how then do they pursue these job interests? Well, they do it in two ways. The first is through collective bargaining, which takes place in local school districts. Through collective bargaining, the unions are able to win countless restrictive work rules written into binding contracts that specify how the schools must be organized. Typically, for example, these contracts include salary rules requiring that teachers be paid entirely on the basis of seniority and credentials, without any regard for whether their students are actually learning anything. Often, these contracts also include seniority rules that allow senior teachers to take desirable jobs that come open, even if these teachers are mediocre in the classroom or a bad fit for the school. There are also seniority rules requiring that, in layoff situations, excellent young teachers must be let go automatically, and their senior colleagues must be kept on no matter how incompetent they may be. Labor contracts are just filled with these kinds of perverse rules. No one who's thinking only of what is best for kids would ever organize the schools in this way. Yet this is how America's schools are actually organized. The other way teachers' unions shape the public schools is through the political process, where they simply have far more clout than any other education groups by many orders of magnitude. They have over 4 million members. They are top contributors to political campaigns. They have armies of activists in the electoral trenches. They have lobbying organizations in all 50 states, and much more. They've used this political clout to block or substantially weaken major reforms. For decades, for example, reformers have tried to bring accountability to American education, but the unions have stood in the way. They've opposed using test scores to measure teacher performance. They've opposed performance-based pay. They've even opposed moving bad teachers out of the classroom. As a result, there are rarely any consequences for low performance. No one's pay suffers. No one loses a job. We have accountability systems in which no one is actually held accountable when kids don't learn. The unions have also fiercely opposed the second major reform movement of our time, the movement for school choice, which seeks to give families new options, to empower them to leave bad schools, and to give the regular public schools stronger incentives to improve. Here, too, the unions fight for their members, not for students and their families. In this case, because school choice allows children, and thus money and jobs, to leave the schools where union members teach. Indeed, the unions are so opposed to choice that they fight to defeat it even for the poorest kids trapped in the nation's worst schools. As a result, after decades of reform efforts, only 4% of public school kids are in charter schools, and less than 1% receive government-funded scholarships for private schools. But here's what it comes down to. The teachers' unions have used their power from the bottom up through collective bargaining to burden the schools with organizations that are literally not designed to be effective. And they've used their power from the top down, through politics, to stand in the way of accountability, choice, and other major reform efforts. As Arne Duncan well expressed, the nation is fully aware that it has a problem with its public schools. But the main reason that problem persists is that there's another problem, a more fundamental one, that prevents real change and improvement, the problem of union power. Until the nation is able to recognize that problem and do something about it, America's public schools will never be organized to provide kids with the most effective education possible. I'm Terry Moe, professor of political science at Stanford University, for Prager University.